ক্লাসে ফোন লাগবে?
Okay, now like every time, I'll just recap very quickly in about 5 minutes what we did in our last class so that the continuity is there, because we would require these expressions in whatever we'll be doing in our today's class. Okay, so we got a concept of the different types of charge distributions when we shifted from discrete to continuous, because we saw that any amount of charge or collection of charge, bunch of charges, is basically multiple of the electronic charge. Now the electronic charge is an extremely small number, so that any collection of discrete charges is basically a very, very huge number of electrons, so that we can replace the discrete charges by continuous density functions, charge density functions. So we saw that there was the line charge density function, so that dq equal to lambda dl, where lambda is dq dl, and if you want to find the total charge from this line charge distribution, then you have to integrate this along the line. Then there was the surface charge distribution, the charge smeared over a surface, sigma equal to d sigma ds, and dq equal to sigma ds therefore. So if you want to find the total charge over here, then you have to integrate over the surface. And finally, we have the volume charge distribution. So volume charge distribution function given by rho equal to dq dv. This is the function that we will be requiring today. And therefore, total charge will be found out by integrating dq equal to rho dv. So if you integrate rho dv, you will find the total charge over a that fills up a volume. Okay, so rho, sigma, and lambda, these are the three charge densities that we came across, and we saw that all are functions of the position coordinate. And for continuous distribution, we shift from sigma to, that is, we shift from summation to integration, so that the force can now be written like this. This was the resultant force due to a number of charges acting on a particular charge. So Qi are the source charges that acts on a particular charge Qj, so that I not equal to j. This is how we found the expression. Now when we shift from discrete to continuous, we change the sign from summation to integration, and we replace the discrete Qi's, point charges, by the distribution functions lambda dl, sigma ds, rho dv, all integrated over r, of course, and summation is replaced by integration. Okay, then we had the concept of the electric field. Now this is the expression that we will be using several times in today's class. So what is the electric field? Basically, we saw that by the principle of superposition, the total force on a particular test charge Q due to a number of source charges, small q1, q2, q3, etc., placed at distances r1, r2, r3, etc., is given by this, following the principle of superposition. So it can be written like capital Q by 4 pi epsilon naught, and within bracket q1 by r1 square r1 cap plus q2 by r2 square r2 cap, etc. So we can use the summation sign over here, and this can be written as capital Q into capital E vector. So this capital E vector is basically, we are substituting for this entire expression 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught summation I equal to 1 to n qi by ri square ri cap. Okay, so this is the expression for the electric field due to the source charges. The resultant electric field due to all the source charges. Obviously, it is a vector that you can see varies from point to point because it will depend on the value and direction of Ri, the value of E. Okay, and physically E is the force per unit charge. Okay, and mathematically we saw that it can be written as the limit q tends to 0 force per unit charge, and then we saw what are the units of E, what is the dimension of E, right? So this is what we did, and then we had the concepts of lines of force, how we can see an electric field, we can see or visualize an electric field because of the presence of the electric lines of force. So a line of force is an imaginary line or curve such that the tangent at any point gives the direction of the electric field at that. So what are the properties of the lines of force? They start from positive charges and terminate on negative charges. Two lines of force may never intersect because you know intersection would indicate presence of two directions at a single point, which is impossible. So this is the visualization of an electric field. They always start from a positive charge and they always terminate on a negative charge. And if there are two charges, for example, placed near to each other, so if they are plus and minus, two opposite charges, then lines of force will start from the positive charge and end of the on the negative charge. Some of them, others will go to other charges placed far away or to infinity, or come from infinity to terminate on the negative charge. So since lines of force act like elastic cords, therefore when opposite charges are placed side by side, they get attracted towards each other. On the other hand, if you place two like charges, then for example, if there are two like positive charges, then the lines of force will start from each and move to infinity. They cannot go and terminate on the neighboring charge because it's opposite in nature. And so in this case, you will have a position in between the two charges where there is no field. It's called the neutral point, and they repel. So this picture of the lines of forces between two neighboring charges also show us how we can understand the phenomena of attraction between unlike charges and repulsion between like charges. And we did some problem which of course. So today what we will start and discuss is the divergence of this electric field. And the divergence of the electric field, the result that we get by calculating the divergence of the electric field, is actually put in the form of a law by Gauss known as Gauss's law. Okay. Now we have all done because when we were preparing for our electrostatics course, remember we had done vectors, and in vector calculus we had come across the del operator. Remember the vector differential operator. And if you remember the three types of operation that the del operator could perform: the gradient, the divergence, and the curl. Okay. So here we are concerned about the divergence of the electric field. Now if you also recall, then we had discussed when we were discussing what is the physical meaning of divergence of a vector. The physical meaning of the divergence of a vector is the flux of the vector at that point. And what is flux? Flux is, if you consider, for example, the particular vector field represented by lines of force, then the number of lines of force crossing unit area when the area is normal to the direction of propagation of the field is called the flux. Okay? And we had discussed this, when there is an enclosed volume and the flux of a vector is 0, that is the divergence is 0, we say the vector is solenoidal. If it's non-zero, we say there is a source. If it's positive, we say there is a source. If it's negative, we say there is a sink. Okay. So we had discussed these points regarding the divergence of a vector field, and now we will apply that divergence property to the electric field and see what is the result when we take the divergence of an electric field. Okay. Now let us consider field lines, that is lines of force, for an electric field that passes through a surface A inclined at an angle theta to the direction of the field. Alright, so let's see the picture. This is it. We have these purple lines here. I've taken this picture from the internet. So these purple lines here are representing our electric field. They are, you can see it's a uniform electric field in this particular area. So they are just parallel vectors, all lines parallel to each other. This is the arrow indicates the direction of the electric field. And we see that these electric field lines, they pass through a surface A, this yellow rectangular surface over here. They pass through the surface A, which is inclined at an angle theta to the direction of the field. So how do we get the direction of a particular area? Remember, the normal to the area will give you the direction of the area when you are treating the area as a vector. So in this case, this direction, this arrow over here where I've written A, this is the direction of the area vector, and so this area is inclined at an angle theta to the electric field. All right. Then the quantity phi equal to EA cos theta, this quantity over here. Okay, E, magnitude of E into the projection of the area in the direction of the electric field, that is A cos theta. You can understand that A, if this is the direction of the vector A, then A cos theta is nothing but the component of A in the direction of E. So that product, magnitude of E into the magnitude of the vector A, the area A, multiplied by cos theta, or rather the product of the magnitude of the field and the component of the area in the direction of the field, that quantity represented by the letter phi is called the flux of the electric field through the area A. Okay. So obviously we can see from our definition of dot product that phi is equal to E dot A, where E and A are both vectors. Okay. So the flux of an electric field through a particular area A, which may be inclined at any angle to the direction of the electric field, is given by the dot product of the electric field with the area vector. So this is what we need. This is the definition of flux of an electric field. Now, how do we get the strength of an electric field? We know that the strength of an electric field is proportional to the density of the field lines, right? Strength of an electric field will be obtained if we see what is the number of field lines passing through a particular area. Okay, number of density means number of field lines per unit area. So it is proportional to the density of field lines. So the flux through any closed surface is basically a measure of the total charge inside. So if you have a closed surface, then the number of lines passing through unit area of the surface will give you an idea about the strength of the electric field. So that the number of electric lines would obviously depend on the total amount of charge inside the surface, right? So qualitatively we can write that the flux through any closed surface is a measure of the total charge inside. Okay. Now let us see how to see this quantitatively. This is something we can understand qualitatively. This is the essence of Gauss's law. Gauss's law will tell you that the flux through a closed surface is a measure of the total charge inside. So what we can understand qualitatively, Gauss's law will give us a mathematical form to this understanding. Okay. So let us first write down Gauss's law exactly. If you are asked to write down Gauss's law in the examination, this is what you will write down. Okay. This is the language that you are required to write down. In SI units, the surface integral of the normal component of the electric field over any closed surface is equal to the total charge inside the surface divided by free space permeability. Okay. In SI units, the surface integral of the normal component of the electric field over any closed surface is equal to the total charge inside the surface divided by the free space permeability. Okay. So if we have a closed surface S enclosing a charge Q, imagine there is a closed surface, say a sphere or a cube, and inside you have a total charge of Q. This may be a single charge or this may be a group of charges totaling to the value of Q. Then according to Gauss's law, according to this language, what will we write mathematically? Closed surface integration E dot n cap ds equal to Q by epsilon naught. Okay. So E dot n cap ds basically gives you the normal component of the electric field over a closed surface, and the total surface integral of that quantity is equal to the total charge enclosed divided by epsilon naught, which is the free space permeability. Okay. We will prove this law and we will see how this basically is related to flux of the electric field. Now let us get some insight into Gauss's law. What is it basically trying to tell us? Okay. So for that, let us consider an isolated positive charge plus Q. Okay. So basically an isolated positive charge, this is the lines of force representation of an isolated positive charge. So plus Q is the isolated positive charge, and we know that the lines of force will be radiating out in all directions. This picture is two-dimensional, but you just keep in mind that the lines of force are radiating in all directions. You have to consider 3D. Okay. So basically they are radiating out spherically outwards. The lines are radiating spherically outwards from the charge plus Q. Okay. Now let us imagine a spherical surface of radius r surrounding this charge. Okay. We'll just imagine this surface doesn't exist. Let us imagine a spherical surface of radius r surrounding this charge, of course with its center at the position of the charge. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, radius r surrounding the charge. All right. So the surface area, since I told you that we are talking, this entire thing is in 3 dimensions. Okay. So the surface area of this sphere of radius r is given by 4 pi r square. You all know the formula for surface area of a sphere. Now suppose the total field lines coming out from Q is n. So for example, in this picture here we can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. Okay. There can be more lines depending on the strength of the charge. Let us denote that number of lines coming out from the charge by the symbol n, capital N. Okay. So the number of lines per unit area of the spherical surface, that is the, remember the density of the lines of force that we were talking about in the previous slide. So the number of lines per unit area of the spherical surface is given by capital N by 4 pi r square. Total number of lines divided by total surface area. So number of lines per unit area is N by 4 pi r square. Clear? Now, let us imagine another spherical surface, again centered at Q, but now of radius 2 capital R. So, we imagine another spherical surface which has radius double that of our first spherical surface. Okay. So, this is the second spherical surface and it has a radius twice R. Alright, so what is the surface area of this spherical surface? 4 pi into 2r whole square, that is 16 pi r square. Obviously, this is of greater surface area than the inner sphere. The green sphere is the outer sphere and the red sphere is the inner sphere. The green sphere has greater surface area than the red sphere. Now the number of lines of force coming out from Q, since Q is constant, we have not changed the charge. So the number of lines of force coming out from Q is still N. So now the number of lines of force that pass through the outer sphere, that is the green sphere, for that the number of lines per unit area of the green sphere is N by 16 pi r square. Okay. So earlier it was N by 4 pi r square for the red sphere, and for the larger sphere, the green sphere, it is N by 16 pi r. So you can see clearly, you can see from the picture also, and you can see from the number also, that the density of lines of force decreases, right, as radius of the sphere surrounding the charge increases. This is 1/4 of the density of lines in the first case. So the density of lines of force passing through the green sphere is 1/4 of that of the red sphere, right? So although the number of lines coming out from Q is the same, that is N, but as you move away from the charge, the density of lines of force passing through a given surface decreases. What does that mean? What does the density of number of lines of force indicate? The strength of the electric field. So as you move away from the charge, as you move further away from the charge, the strength of the electric field decreases, although you are still calculating the strength for the same charge Q. So from this picture itself, it is clear how the strength of the electric field will decrease as you move away from the charge. Okay, so we can say that the density of lines of force is proportional to the magnitude of the field. Now the magnitude of the field on the surface at distance r, we know how to we have just learned how to calculate the magnitude of the electric field at a distance r from it. And so for this charge Q, the magnitude of the electric field at distance r, so anywhere on the surface of the red sphere, the value is Q by 4 pi epsilon naught capital R square, right? Whereas for the green sphere, the magnitude of the electric field anywhere on the green sphere is Q by 4 pi epsilon naught 2r whole square, right? So if you multiply field with area E into A, then for the red sphere, E into A is Q by epsilon naught. Q by 4 pi epsilon naught r square multiplied by area of the red sphere, that is 4 pi r square. So 4 pi r square cancels out, we are left with Q by epsilon naught. For the green sphere, if you calculate the product E into A, we again get Q by epsilon naught. Q by 4 pi epsilon naught 2r whole square into 4 pi 2r whole square. So again we are left with Q by epsilon naught. Okay. So although we can understand from the previous discussion that density of lines of force is proportional to the magnitude of the field, and it definitely decreases as we move away from the charge. But if you multiply the strength of the electric field with the area of the surface at which you are calculating the strength, then the value does not change. The product of field into area, into surface area, is Q by epsilon naught for the red sphere, that is the smaller sphere. It remains Q by epsilon naught for the green sphere, that is the larger sphere. Whatever the radius of sphere you take, you can draw infinite number of spherical shells like this of different radii surrounding this charge Q. The product of the magnitude of the field and the area of that particular sphere will always remain equal, and the value will always come to Q by epsilon naught. Okay, so you can see that this is something special, and this product, the product of the magnitude of the electric field with the area of the surface through which you are considering the lines of force to come out, that is known as the flux of the electric field. And you can see that for a closed surface, the flux depends only on the enclosed charge. It is independent of the distance from the charge at which you are trying to calculate the value. It depends only on the value of the enclosed charge. So here the enclosed charge is Q, no matter which spherical shell you take to calculate the flux. So although the density of lines of force at the different spherical shells, but the flux that remains unchanged.
Ma'am, your voice is not clear. Ma'am, your voice is breaking. Ma'am, can't able to hear you. Ma'am, you're not audible. Ma'am, you're not audible.
Distorted. It's still coming distorted.